My name is Davida Hatton. I'm the Director of Operations Support for the Department of Community Supervision. In my role as the Director of Operations Support, I'm over the POM unit, which is the Probation Options Management unit, and the Audits and Compliance for Field Services. My role as the Director of Operations Support makes the department more efficient by allowing the circuits to utilize POM so we can handle low-level misdemeanor violations and technical violations with a hearing officer instead of having to have someone remain in county jail and then have to go before a judge, and it reduces the time between those. And then the audits unit, we increase our efficiency by looking at the policies and procedures, regulations, things of that nature, to see if what we're doing is actually giving us the results that we want, or if we need to maybe modify or look at those policies. What originally drew me to DCS and community corrections, basically my Aunt Quincy worked with the Department of Corrections in the HR department. She was like a personnel person, so she was really happy. And I would come down and have lunch with her sometimes, even here at the Sloppy Floyd building, and we talked about it, so I decided I would come, and at that time you had to come down here in person, take a typing test, do all that kind of stuff. And basically there were 3 departments that responded to my application, and one was the Department of Motor Vehicles, and then it was the Department of Corrections, and then the department, like the bankruptcy trustee department. Marietta Probation was the first one to actually offer me an interview and offer me a position. So I took a $4,000 pay cut and went from driving basically 2 miles to my office to driving 27 miles each way, but I was happy. I needed a job that offered flexibility. I had 2 kids that were really small, and I needed something stable with a guaranteed income that would let me, take off time with my kids when I needed to. In 1998, in February, the position that I got was the Otis clerk, where we were kind of behind the scenes. I was putting stuff in that you would see on someone's criminal history. So basically the sentence information, if we had revocations, that kind of stuff. And then I had an opportunity to apply for a Secretary 2 position, which was the Chief's Secretary. And basically at that time for support staff, that was about as high as I could go with the department, unless I was gonna, try to go work at the Commissioner's office or something like that. So after that, I ended up, my chief at the time was really good in allowing us to, if we wanted to go to school and things like that. Kennesaw was basically 4 or 5 miles up the road. So I went to Kennesaw, finished my 2-year degree, because I already had 2 years, got my bachelor's, and then I applied for a position as an officer, but I was living in Douglas County at the time, so I actually applied for the position that Douglas County had, with a caveat to my chief that, if I didn't like it or if they were mean, could I come back home to Marietta? And he was like, you're gonna be fine. So I went out there and I stayed there. I actually met my husband in the courtroom in Douglas County. I was working as the court person for Judge Emerson's courtroom, and my husband was working at the Assistant District Attorney's office. So we met there, and then that was in 2004. Well, we got married in 2007, so I actually transferred back to the Marietta Probation Office. There was an officer, she's actually a community coordinator now in Douglasville. She was working in Cobb but lived in Douglas, and I was working in Douglas but lived in Cobb. So since we were the same level at that time, we just actually did like an equal transfer. So I went out there, and I was there for about, I guess, until 2014. I became an assistant chief in 2007, and then went on developmental assignment in 2014 for the Audits and Compliance. I was the deputy director when we were under the Department of Corrections for the field supervision portion of it. And then, 2015, DCS was formed, so I went to Columbus. And then I was in Columbus until 2022 when I got promoted to the position that I'm in now. And while I was in Columbus in 2018, I became the chief of that circuit. The most rewarding part about my job is kind of a 2-part, because I have one where it's more geared towards employees and people I've worked with, because throughout my career, even when I was a secretary in Marietta, I supervised other employees. So I've had a lot of opportunity to work with people and see them grow. And sometimes you have to kind of push people outside of their comfort zone, because I could see the potential in someone and maybe that person couldn't, or maybe they were a little timid or they were kind of unsure. So it's really rewarding to see people go on to bigger and better things. And then as far as like supervisees, I didn't work in any circuit that actually had a day reporting center until I went to Columbus. So the most rewarding part about that is actually seeing the transformation from when someone starts the program and maybe they're not on board with it and they really, they're not buying into the whole DRC concept until they kind of get through it, and then you see that same person and they are a completely different person when they're graduating the program, and they have their family that maybe they've reunited with and their friends, and it's just a really heartwarming celebration. Some of the challenges that I've had to overcome in my role, I guess my first big challenge was I didn't make it through basic. I flunked out. I couldn't shoot, and it was horrible. It was like a really, really bad day. So I finished my degree. I had laser surgery on my eyes, and I went through, and then I got sent home. So I'm like, oh great, now what am I gonna do? So that was difficult. I went and trained, came back through, made it through fine the second time around. That was probably the beginning of my career. And then as I kind of transitioned throughout my career, the biggest challenge that I've had in my current role is when we're going through and we're auditing a circuit, we're auditing the cases. We're not auditing the actual employees. And I can say as a chief, I was very protective of my staff. And I understand that whole entire concept of, you have some really good folks and everybody makes mistakes, but audits are not meant to embarrass or to intimidate or to just make things really uncomfortable. It's just to give a snapshot of a circuit and maybe identify some trends and some patterns and things like that. So those are the things that I've had to overcome is how to convey all of that information, but still be tactful and be, present it in a way that it's useful and not scary. My proudest moment in DCS has been when I graduated from the Command College. I did that last December. I never thought that I would actually get a master's degree. And so I started August of 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic. So it was hard, but it was rewarding, and I met a lot of different people from a lot of different agencies and got a lot of different perspectives. One final thing that I would like to share is, be nice and kind to everybody, because you're never going to know who may be your supervisor in your next circuit. And then even if you face challenges or disappointments because maybe you go for a position and you don't get promoted, remain positive, because the way that you act after a disappointment shows your true character. And then, it'll serve you well in the end.